Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. I just want to say, way to go. Way to go on taking the time to be a part of church today. And if this is your first time joining us here at Engage, I want to especially welcome you. It's really awesome to have new people joining, and kudos to whomever may have invited you to partake with us today. It's been a true blessing every week to still be able to connect and hold church and gather as God's church. And if you haven't been with us up to this point, this is what we've been doing in the midst of all the social distancing and things being shut down. But I think it's just been wonderful. I feel really good about the messages we're hearing and still being able to sing with you all. And so I just want to lift that up, and again, just share how much I appreciate that. So if you've never done church with Engage before, the way that we run our services is we start with a time of singing and worship, and then we go into a teaching message. And we've been doing a couple of songs each week here online, so we'll continue to do that again today. With that, no matter where you're at, if you're sitting on the couch or in the kitchen making breakfast or out in the yard or wherever you are, I just want to invite you to come into this time of singing and let the Spirit move you if you're ready for that. So let's do it. Lord of all creation, the water, earth, and sky, Amen. The next song we're going to sing is called Do It Again. And the bridge of this song is just one of my all-time favorite bridges in worship music. And we just build into a time of saying, I've seen you move the mountains, and I'll see you do it again. And I believe that. I want everyone that's tuning in and singing along or watching today to believe in that. It's hard to be in the moment and only fixate on and see the bad things that are happening. But there's blessings on the other side, and I have faith that God's got something big for us when we get through this. So let's sing this next song together. Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you had never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you had never failed me yet. Your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands, this is my confidence, you never fail me yet. I know the night won't last, your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands, this is my confidence, you never fail. God, we just sing those words in just ultimate faith and trust in you. You haven't failed us. You're not going to fail us. You are there for us. Your hand is on our shoulders, and you've got a plan. We just acknowledge who you are and acknowledge that we are not at the level that you are, God, and we just lift up all the troubles, all the fear, all the uncertainty that we have right now, God. I just lift that up to you for this church and for the community and for the world, that we can just rely on you and lean into you and into each other and just move forward because we know that you love us and you've got a plan for us. So just thank you for the Father that you are, for loving us the way that you do, and we just want to run to you, God. Thank you so much for loving us. Amen.
Good morning, Engage. For those of you who don't know us, we're Nick and Linda. And like you, we're just members of the Engage family. So on behalf of the Engage leadership team, we want to welcome and thank you for joining us on Facebook or YouTube. We're starting our 4th week of the series, Walk This Way, where we're learning to be more and more like Jesus. One of the things Jesus did was invite people. And if you're like me, you struggle with inviting people to anything. A great way to start is by simply inviting them to like and follow the Engage page.
We know how difficult it can be to stay connected during these times, so we encourage you to not only share or invite people to view the message, but feel free to connect and interact with others. During the week, you can join and invite someone to the Flipping Through Philippians Bible Study with Pastor Rich. The Bible study meets on Zoom, Thursdays at 7 p.m. The Zoom information is sent out via text the same day as the study. To make sure you get the text message, text CONNECT to 218-220-6191. Don't worry if you're not well versed on the Bible. The nice thing about the study is that it's good for all levels, whether you're new to church or have attended Bible college.
Before we hear from Pastor Levi, we want to thank you for supporting Engage Church, especially through these times. If you would like to send a tithe or donation, you can do so one of 3 ways: by downloading the Church Center app and finding Engage Church Duluth, or by visiting our church website at engagechurchduluth.com, or by mailing a check to 5558 East Grandview Road, Duluth, Minnesota 55810. Your donation supports Engage and the goals of sharing Jesus with more and more people.
Thanks for being here. Let's listen into Pastor Levi as we continue to walk
this
way.
Hello and welcome to Engage Church Online. My name is Levi, lead pastor here at Engage, and I just want to say thanks so much for being here today, for starting your Sunday off with us, your week off with us, knowing that there's other things you could be doing. You're taking the time to just log on and hang out with us for a little bit. And you know, whether you've been here one time, maybe 2 times, watched us 3 times, or you've watched us for a long time, I just want you to hear from the bottom of my heart that you belong here. That's something we firmly believe at Engage Church. We are a church that wants to do things a little bit differently, wants to make church comfortable, make church something that's understandable for everyone. So it's something that you want to keep doing. And so, you know, I would just encourage you to keep checking us out if this is your first, second, or third time. And maybe even if you're feeling comfortable, invite someone else to check it out too. One of the great things about being online right now, since we can't meet physically together, is that it's so much easier to invite people to church because they might not have ever wanted to step in the doors of the Clyde Ironworks at 10 a.m. on Sundays, which is where and when we typically would meet if we were together in person. But it's a lot more comfortable from their home in front of their own computer to just check things out from kind of a safe distance. And we understand that. And, you know, that's why we encourage people, if you're watching on Facebook today, if you're watching on YouTube, would you just like this video? Would you maybe even comment in the comment section? Both YouTube and Facebook have comment sections. Just let us know you're out there. Let us know what you think of Engaged Church and what we've been doing online. We'd love to get your feedback. Love to know that you're watching with us, that you're doing things together with us online, even when we can't be physically together. And would you share this video on Facebook? We promote this like, comment, and share every week. Why? Because it is a great and easy way to invite people to check out Engage, to see, this church is a little bit different. They do things a little differently, and I think maybe I could belong here. Maybe I have a place here. And if that's you, you absolutely do. So please, again, if you would be so kind to like, comment, share, both YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're at, right now, just take a second to do that. We would really appreciate it. Thanks so much for doing that. You've caught us in the fourth week of a series we've been in called Walk This Way. And this series is 5 weeks long, so next week we'll be wrapping it up. And each week we kind of give a recap, so don't feel like you're behind or anything. But the series as a whole, just to give you some background, is it's been based off one Bible verse. And that Bible verse comes from the book of 1 John, and it's in chapter 2, verse 6. 1 John is a very short and small book. It's near the back of the Bible, almost near the end. It was written by one of Jesus's closest followers and friends, who you probably guessed it, his name was John. And in chapter 2, verse 6, he tells us something very interesting, which is what we've based this entire series around. This is what it says. Take a look with me. It says, "Whoever claims to be in him must walk as Jesus did." And what that verse is really getting at is that if I claim to be in him, and him referring to Jesus, so if I claim to be in him, to follow him, to be a Christian, if you will, then I need to walk the way that Jesus walked. And other translations would actually say I need to live how Jesus lived. And that's really the heart of the matter, is I need my life to be ever more like Jesus. I need to be more and more living the way that he lived. And so that's why we've taken the last few weeks to look back in the Bible at Jesus' life, to see kind of who he cared about, who he spent his time with, the things he talked about, so that we can learn, little by little, more and more, I would even say step by step, to walk how Jesus walked. And, the first week we talked about the fact that Jesus invited people. It didn't matter, what your occupation was, what your social status was, how much money you had or how little money you had. It didn't matter. Anywhere and everywhere in between, Jesus was inviting people, saying, "Come, follow me. Come learn how to live differently. Come learn how to live your best life by following me and learning from me." He invited people over and over again. And we actually challenged you guys in week 1, just invite one person to church. And what's kind of cool is, imagine who's watching today because of that invite that you gave. Imagine people who are now learning and growing and connecting with us because you took the time to live like Jesus and invited them. And that's what's so cool about being online today, is that just like back in Jesus' time in person, how we go up to people and say, "Hey, come follow me," that's kind of intimidating. Being online, it is so easy to invite. It is click, 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 like, comment, share, tag my friend here, say, "Hey, come check out this video." That's the same thing. And if you haven't taken us up on the challenge of inviting someone yet, I would just encourage you, man, share this video, tag someone in the comment section, ask your friends, go invite your friends to like and follow Engaged Church Duluth on Facebook. That's the same thing as inviting them to come and get to know Jesus, because that's what Engage is about. We want to help people connect with each other and with God. So I would encourage you to do that. And then in the second week of this series, Jesus showed us how important it is that we not just know what the Bible says, but that we understand and apply it. And he actually kind of criticized some religious leaders of his day. They were called the Pharisees, and they were kind of like the pastors of Bible time. They memorized the Bible. They knew it from front to back, cover to cover, all that. They had it all up here. But when it came to actually understanding the implications of what the Bible is saying and how it was supposed to change how they lived, they didn't get it. They didn't want to put into practice what they knew in their head. They didn't want to put it into practice in their heart. And then so on from that, Jesus actually criticized them further and said, you look really good on the outside. You try to look the part and look all spiritual, but inside, you're kind of a mess. Jesus actually says you're like a dish. You work really hard to clean the outside of this dish, this bowl, but inside it's all grimy and greasy and gross. And I talked about that last week. I said, we need to clean the inside of a Tupperware bowl just as good as we need to clean the outside. Because if we don't scrub that inside, it's still going to be dirty. It's still going to be greasy and grimy. And that's what Jesus is saying. He's saying you need to focus on the inside before you worry about the outside. And what's actually really cool is Jesus told these Pharisees, he says, first clean the inside, and the outside will become clean as a result of that. Now, that doesn't quite work with Tupperware and dishes, because that would be super cool if it did. It might make washing dishes kind of more enjoyable and go faster. But what's really cool for us as we try to follow God is if we take the time, this is our challenge to you, is saying, ask God, pray each day, God, show me what's in my life that doesn't please you. Show me the sin. Sin is a term for when we do things that God says are wrong or that he's not pleased with. Show me sin in my life on the inside and help clean that away so that outside I can be clean and I can be more and more like you. And this week I want to talk about another thing that Jesus did. And that's the fact that Jesus served people. He was a servant. And we're going to be taking a look at a story from the book of John. It's also known as the Gospel of John. It's going to be in chapter 13. And I actually, just before we jump into that, I want to pray and then we'll get going. But I want to pray because I really want us to just ask that God would show us what he wants us to learn today, that we would be ready to learn and ready to apply it so that we can live more like him. So would you pray with me? Lord, I just thank you for this day. I thank you for the opportunity we have to come together online, meeting all over the city, even outside the city, people who are watching outside of Duluth. I just thank you that we can meet together in this way. And I pray that today, as we look at how you lived your life as a servant, that we would learn from that, we would understand it, and that more importantly, we would apply it. And that we would become more and more like you, Jesus. We would live more like you. We would walk the way that you walked, and that people would take notice. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So I said that Jesus was a servant, right? His whole purpose in life was to serve. He went around healing people, teaching people, meeting needs, caring for others, putting others' needs ahead of his own. That was his thing. He was a servant. And, when I was in college, I had an RA. RA stands for, I think, resident advisor, resident assistant. I don't know. It's been a while since I've been in college. But I had an RA. His name was Matt. And here's actually a picture of us. Now, Matt's the guy who's being smushed in the middle of the photo. That's our RA, Matt. And the other guy is David, who was my roommate. And we loved Matt. We thought he was just a really cool guy, really nice RA, helpful. And, the thing about Matt is he actually wanted to serve us one week. It was one of his goals to say, I want to serve everyone who lives in my dorm, in my residence here that I'm in charge of. I'm going to serve each of you for a week straight. Everyone's going to get 1 week where, if you need something, I will be there for you because I want to model service, just like Jesus came to serve. I want to do that. It was a Bible college, so he was doing those things, trying to teach us. And David and I, we were good guys, but back then we were a little bit more rambunctious and kind of wild, and so we kind of made it a little bit more difficult for Matt to serve. He would say, hey, how can I help you this week? And I would say, would you mind washing our dishes, right? And he'd be like, yeah, no problem. So we'd go over to the sink and start washing our dishes. And I said, oh, no, there's more. And just to be difficult and just to be kind of a pain, we would actually go and grab all the clean silverware that we had, which in college was not that much, but we would grab it all and we would throw it in the sink with the dirty stuff and say, there, now all our dishes are there for you to wash, because we just wanted to be kind of a pain and just make it a little bit more difficult for him. I remember him asking me, how can I serve you this week, Levi? And I said, you know what, Matt, I really need a piggyback ride down to the main building every day this week. I really need transportation. Can you hook me up? And I was kind of joking, but also kind of just wanted to see what he would do. And he actually did it. And I felt kind of silly being up on that little guy's shoulders and, walk into the main building. People kind of looking at us strange, but he did it. And the point is first, don't be like me in that story. Don't be making things harder for people than it has to be. Don't, I would say, be a jerk to people, if you will, even if you think it's funny. Don't be like that, because I don't endorse that. The point of the story that I do like is that despite the junk and the garbage and the hardships and kind of how we made it difficult for Matt, he didn't complain. He just did it. He served, and he showed us an example of how Jesus lived his life. That even when people didn't believe him or didn't want to follow him or, criticized him or whatever, he still cared for them. He still met their needs. And he still served them where they were at. And so I'm indebted to my former RA Matt for teaching me that lesson even years later. I'm not going to tell you how many years, but it's years later. I still remember that example of service. And it's that same service that Jesus shows us in John chapter 13. Starting with verse 3, let's see what it says. It says this: Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Now, before we unpack those verses, it's really important to give you guys a little bit of background, some context, if you will. And that this scene that we're seeing play out in these verses, it's commonly referred to as the Last Supper. And it's basically the last meal that Jesus is going to share with his followers before he is arrested, tortured, and killed. And that makes everything that he does, every action, every word he says, have a little bit more weight to it. It makes it just a little bit more important, a little bit more demanding of our attention. Because even as it says in verse 3, it says, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands. Another version from the Message would say, Jesus knew that the Father had put him in complete charge of everything. Even knowing that, Jesus' actions show us what was important to him. It shows us that even knowing that he was in complete control, he knew that he was about to die, he knew he was about to go and be tortured and arrested and all this bad stuff, and he could have just snapped his fingers and stopped it. He was in complete control, and yet he didn't. What he did instead is even more significant, because you got to understand, try to empathize with Jesus for a second. He must have been afraid. He must have been anxious, just thinking about over and over again, every tick of the clock, every second that went by, knowing he's getting closer and closer to this terrible torture and death, and that he could stop it. All this stuff swirling in his brain, and yet what does he do? How does he respond? Jesus doesn't snap his fingers and stop it. He doesn't, kind of clap his hands and demand that the disciples start washing his feet because God's put him in total power and control. So wash my feet, serve me. No. From his high position, he shows us that he is still a servant. And despite all the stuff going on in his mind, all the anxiety and the fear, he puts that on pause. And he kneels down and he starts washing his disciples' feet. And I got to think about you and I for a second, think, how would we respond? How do we respond when we have opportunities to serve, when there's needs out there? Do we think, that's kind of beneath me because I'm up here and that's kind of down here? Because that's not what we see Jesus do. Jesus was like way up here. He's not even on camera right now. And yet he's kneeling down to wash feet. In our lives, when we have all this stuff going on, sometimes we don't have like the greatest circumstances that we find ourselves in. We're anxious, we're fearful, we're hurting, we're not in good health, we're busy, whatever it might be. Do we follow Jesus' example and hit that pause button, get down on our knees, and start washing feet? Do we start serving others despite all that's going on, despite our position in life? Something to think about. And what's really interesting about this whole foot washing thing is that, Jesus gave himself wholeheartedly and deliberately to it. Because when you would have a meal like this, the feet would be washed before you entered the dining room. That was kind of the custom. And for the disciples to have come into this dining room, if you will, without their feet washed, had to have been planned. It had to have been an effort by Jesus to say, I don't want this to be halfway done. You need to understand this example in the fullest. That I don't want your feet to have been already washed so that when I go to wash them, it's kind of like a half-hearted example. I want it to be the real thing. He was deliberate in how he wanted to show them, this is how you serve. You go all the way. He was wholeheartedly committed to teaching them this is what serving others looks like. Because if he just wanted to teach an object lesson, if he just wanted to say, hey, here's a cool lesson on service, he could have just told someone ahead of time, have a bowl of water set up, have some towels, I'll wipe a few feet, and that'll be good. We'll call it good. They'll get it, right? No. He gave himself wholeheartedly to this lesson, to this act of service. And the awkward thing is that washing feet was really nasty. I mean, in the comment section right now, give me a thumbs up, give me a hand raise. If you are just a foot phobe, like you can't stand feet, you don't even like the sight of them, like do not even dare wear flip-flops around you. Like if you're that person, I get it. Feet are kind of weird. But understand that back in this time, it was so much worse. I mean, they were walking on roads that were not very cleanly. They were dirty, they were dusty, they were stepping in camel stuff and other things. And, their feet were gross. And even then, the table that they would eat this meal at was more like a coffee table. It was closer to the ground, right? And so what they would do is they wouldn't sit in chairs. They would actually lay kind of on pillows and eat propped up, which means that their feet were exposed. People could see them and, more importantly, probably smell them. And yet in all that, in all of Jesus' position, God giving him charge of everything, and everything he must have had going on in his mind with what was about to happen with his arrest, torture, and death, he knelt down and washed those nasty, stinky, gross feet, showing us that he is not above any service, no matter how menial, no matter how demeaning. Because the thing is, in that culture, the Jewish people didn't even want their servants, didn't even want their family members washing feet. It was so demeaning. It was so beneath people. It was so shocking that Jesus would do this because it was so looked down upon. And the other thing is that when Jesus took off his outer garments, like verse 3 said, all that he would have had left on would have been just a small, thin robe, which is actually in that society what slaves wore. That was their outfit. That was their uniform, if you will. And so Jesus, very symbolically, very deliberately, is showing his followers, I am not above any task, no matter how small, no matter how insignificant, how gross, disgusting, or menial it may seem. I will take that role on if I can serve someone and meet their needs. How shocking it must have been to see this respected teacher, this person that the disciples followed, doing this task for them that they viewed as so beneath most people, so just undesirable. And that's the thing, is that when we serve the way that Jesus served, when we meet needs the way that Jesus met needs, when we do it in the way that Jesus did things, when we live in his example, people take notice because it's not normal, it's not typical, it's counter-cultural, it's shocking, and it causes people to stop and say, what's up with that? I want to live like that, because man, if you can do those things with a good attitude and want to just go and serve and nothing is beneath you, you are really living out what Jesus did, and I want some of that. I was trying to think of how to relate this situation and how to make it applicable and what this scenario would be like. And the only thing I could think of to come close is I used to work an office job. And my office was directly adjacent to kind of a private bathroom, if you will. So, whenever it was flush, the toilet that is, I heard it. I knew what was going on. I was just aware of the happenings around the bathroom. I was just that adjacent to it. Prime office space, really. And I remember one of the employees at the company I was working for, midway through the day, just became violently ill. Just like hit him just like that. Just like out of nowhere. Violently ill. And not like a pretty type of violently ill. I mean, this was like both ends. Okay? That's what we're talking about. As real as it gets. And they went in that bathroom and it was not a good scene. I mean, just not good. Didn't smell good. Didn't look good. Didn't sound good. Remember my proximity to the bathroom. I was like front row seats. And it wasn't good. And why I think that is similar to this foot washing story is because there was an administrative assistant in the office. They'd answer the phones, they'd transfer calls, sometimes they'd print stuff off, make copies, do a lot of helpful things. But nowhere in their job description were they to clean up a bathroom that had been absolutely decimated by a violent stomach flu. And yet I watched this administrative assistant with the utmost compassion and the utmost love and service comfort this employee who was probably super embarrassed, probably still didn't feel well, was feeling pretty weak. Just comfort her, wade into the muck in the bathroom, and clean it up. It wasn't her job to do that. It wasn't her responsibility. But she saw the need, and she answered the call. She served. She didn't think, that's not in my job description. Call maintenance. Call a janitor. I'm above that. No. She said, here's where I can help. Here's where I can show and share the love of Jesus with someone else. And I know that was the perspective they took because I knew this administrative assistant and I know that they follow Jesus, and that was the heart behind this act of service. To get in that bathroom, to clean up the puke and the other stuff and just everything that was just not good about that bathroom after this incident, they did it happily because they were following in the footsteps of Jesus. They were following his example on how to serve well. No task is above me. I will serve where there is a need. Verse 12 says this, as we wrap up this story. It says, when he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? Now, Jesus asking this question is super significant to me. Because usually what you see is a pattern throughout Jesus' life when he's trying to teach his disciples something. He'll tell them kind of an illustration. We call them parables, if you will. He'll tell them a story and it'll have like a life lesson in it. And the disciples are usually kind of dense and they don't get it. And they kind of have to go back to Jesus and say, well, what do you mean? And what I think is significant when Jesus says, do you understand? Is that he's cutting out the middleman. He's saying, I'm not going to give you the time to come back to me and kind of say, what does that mean, Jesus? I mean, what's the significance of this? This is so important. This is so critical that Jesus doesn't want to let a moment pass by after this demonstration, this illustration, this act of service, that he cuts to the quick and says, do you understand? Do you get it? And I would ask that question to us. We know the story. We've read through it, parts of it. Do we understand? Because understanding leads to applying. Do we understand what Jesus wants us to do? What he's calling us to do to serve others, no matter how big or small the task? I love it in verse 13. It goes on to say, you call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do just as I have done for you. And as I studied this, one of the things I wrote down in my notes was Jesus is asking us or saying to us, don't honor me with mere words. Imitate me. Live like me. Do what I have done. I've shown you how to serve. Now serve. Don't think of yourselves too highly. Think of yourself as a servant. Be willing to not be at the seat of honor at the table. Be willing to be down on your knees, washing the feet. That's the life I'm calling you to. And what's really, really cool is that before this dinner starts, and we don't see this in the book of John, but we find it in other books of the Bible, specifically in Luke. It talks about this same supper, and it says that before the meal started, the disciples were actually having an argument about which one of them was the greatest of Jesus' followers. Like, I'm the best Christian, and I'm so much better than you, and I follow Jesus the best. They were having this argument. And for Jesus to do this act of service and teach them a lesson in so that they are not above anyone. And in fact, the greatest among them would actually follow Jesus' example and be a servant, be willing to humble themselves and meet the needs of others, no matter how big or small. And as we close this morning, I want to share a quote with you. And the words are going to be up on the screen. It's from Martin Luther King Jr., inspirational civil rights leader. And it comes from one of his speeches. And I think it really just ties this all together in that if we really want to follow Jesus, if we want to live the life he lived, which I think was a pretty great life, he did a lot of great things. If we want to be great like him and honor him, we need to be a servant. I just want you to take a minute, listen to these words from Martin Luther King Jr. directly, and then we're going to pray and close for the day.
If you want to be important, wonderful. If you want to be recognized, wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. But recognize that he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. That's a new definition of greatness. And this morning, the thing that I like about it, by giving that definition of greatness, it means that everybody can be great. Because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You don't have to know about Plato and Aristotle to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics in physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace.
You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to understand Einstein's theory of relativity. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree. You don't have to have all the knowledge in the world. You don't have to be all fancy and special. You just need to want to follow Jesus' example. When he said you have to have a heart full of grace, that comes from wanting to follow Jesus, from saying, Jesus, come into my life, help me to follow you. I want to be more like you. That's what you need to be great, to be a servant. We've seen today that Jesus served, that no task was beneath him. No task was too insignificant, too small, too menial, too gross, disgusting, whatever, that he wouldn't answer the bell and meet the need when it presented itself. My challenge to you is this: where are you serving? What needs are around you right now? Maybe it's at your church. Maybe it's at Engage. Maybe we have needs, when we actually get to meet together again. Maybe it's that we need people in our children's ministry to love our kids and work with them and teach them about Jesus. Maybe it's on worship team. Need musicians to serve. Maybe it's set up and tear down, putting chairs up. Maybe it's in the sound and the equipment. Maybe it's just praying for the ministry that we do. That's some things at church areas of service. Where are you plugging in and serving and following Jesus' example? And then also just in your own life, where are you serving? How are you inspiring other people? Just like Jesus' actions probably were shocking and probably made people think like, wow, like this is really interesting that he would get down and wash his disciples' feet. This is unheard of. I'm taking note of this. Who's taking note of the way you live your life and how you serve others? I was at Starbucks the other day, and we got up to the window, and I'll admit we had splurged. We had probably spent too much, venti, large drinks, and a breakfast sandwich and all that. So we had splurged, and we pull up to the window, and the barista says to us, he says, "Oh, the car in front of you actually paid for your order." Which I thought was really cool because, we've done that before. Sometimes they call it the drive-through difference. You try to just make someone's day and make them smile and serve them by paying for their meal, the car behind you. I thought that was cool. But what was even more cool is what was said next. He said, the car in front of you paid for your meal because the car in front of them paid for theirs. And as I sat there, Andy and I looked at each other and we said, well, we're going to pay for the people behind us then. Absolutely. We were doing that, no question. And we did. And I don't say that to pat us on the back, but I say it because I'm thinking, I really wish I could know how long that chain went unbroken of people serving other people based on one person's actions and example. So today, as you consider where you can serve, where you can jump in and start meeting needs, and doing so with the attitude that Jesus had, I'm not above anything. I want to follow Jesus. I encourage you to think, what could I start doing? Who could I start serving where it could start a chain reaction that's similar? Because as we walk and live more and more like Jesus, the more and more ripple effects and impact we're going to see in our lives, in the lives of our friends and our family, in our community in Lincoln Park, where our church is located, and in our world. Where are you serving today? Jesus, thank you for today. Bless the rest of our Sunday. Help us to see needs, to meet them, to serve with the same attitude you had, to not be above anything, but willing to get down on our knees for everything, for anyone, in any situation, for any need, to wash those feet, to meet those needs, and to do it with the attitude and the heart that you did it. Amen. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Join us next week online, 10 a.m. We're going to be wrapping up the Walk This Way series. If you're looking for other great ways to connect, hit up Pastor Rich this week, Thursdays, 7 p.m. on Zoom. He's doing a Bible study through Philippians. Super great. You will not regret joining that. Have a great rest of your Sunday. We'll see you next time.
I can see the promised land. Throw this pain within the plan. There is victory in the end. Your love is my battle cry. When my fears like Jericho, building walls around my soul. My heart is overthrown. Your love is my battle cry. The anthem for all my life. Every giant will fall, the mountains will move. Every chain of the past you've broken into. Over fear, over lies, we're singing the truth. Nothing is impossible with you.
over lies. We're singing the truth that nothing is impossible with you. No great name, no higher name, no stronger name than Jesus. Overcame, no care or chain, forever reigning Jesus. No greater name, no higher name, no stronger name than Jesus. Overcame, no care or chain, forever reigning Jesus. Every giant will fall, the mountains will move, every chain of the past you've broken into. Over fear, over lies, we're singing the truth that